And greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. I remind everybody, please hit that like, share, and subscribe. There's a PayPal link down below for anybody who wants to share some love. And of course, the wrong one. StreamYard link is down there for anybody who wants to join the panel. Let's see, here's something. Where do I have? There it is. Okay. And if you remember the other day, we left off on the four basic paths of logic to think about, and that is if the premise and conclusion are both the same, then the logic is true. If they are opposing dynamically, one is true and one is false, it doesn't matter which position, then the logic is false. So we continue on, and it says, logicians have an answer to the above charge, and the answer is perfectly tight and logically consistent. That is part of the problem. Consistency is not enough. People think that, like in a mathematical setup, that if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, that's consistent enough to believe that the rest of the equation that you're looking at is going to go in that numerical order. And it doesn't always work like that. Consistency is not enough. Logic should be not just a mathematically consistent system, but a human instrument for understanding reality, for dealing with real people, real things, and real arguments about the real world. That is the basic assumption of old logic. If that assumption is naive and uncritical, unfashionable, and unintelligent, well, welcome to Logistics for Dummies. It looks like we've got an overview. And then section 5, it says, the 3 acts of the mind. The 3 acts of the mind. This section gives you the outline for all of logic. It is an expansion of the previous section 4 and a summary of the rest of the book. The basis for the science and art of logic is 2 facts. The fact that human beings think, and the fact that thought has a structure. It's not that we see things. It's not that we hear things. It's not that we smell things or touch things or anything. It's not the observance. It's the process. Observance is the first element of that process in many things. Not always. That structure can be classified from various points of view and for various purposes. For instance, a physiologist or a physician might distinguish brain activity of the autonomic nervous system, breathing, for activity of the frontal lobes, self-conscious thought. A moralist might think or might distinguish thoughts that are voluntary and under our control from those that are involuntary, since we are responsible only for what is under our control. A Marxist would distinguish thoughts supposedly produced by a capitalist system from those produced by a communist system. But from the viewpoint of logic, we distinguish 3 kinds of thoughts, 3 acts of the mind. Simple apprehension, which is where the element of observance comes in. You can apprehend something through touch, through smell, through taste, through sound, through sight. Those are different ways of apprehension. And then you have to judge what you apprehended. and then you have to reason through it as to whether you can use it or not. Simple apprehension is a technical term. It means basically conceiving, understanding, or comprehending one object of thought, one concept, such as mortal, or man, or triangle with unequal angles. Animals apparently cannot perform this act of understanding. If they can, they do not express it in words. That's what I was speaking about the other day. Animals observe things in their life, but they don't have a communication system where they can express what they observe through taste, touch, smell, hearing, and all that. Whereas mankind is the only creature that's done that. That's why we discussed this logic of putting things in order. And that's why it says the moralist doesn't equate to your involuntary actions. Those are instinctual. And that's a part of that reptilian brain, the instincts that kick in automatically if you see something that isn't right and tells you to either fight or flight. Those are the only two choices, and it doesn't come by reason or logic. It comes by intuition and instincts that are already ingrained in us. So when we're talking about the higher level of thought, we're getting into the logic and reason. That's something that only man does. As far as we know, we've never been able to get any communication from any animal to correlate that maybe they do the same thing. Goes on to say, computers certainly cannot do this. A computer no more understands what you program into it than a library building understands the information in the books you put into it. This is what I keep trying to tell people that are trying to fearmonger that this AI is going to sometime overtake mankind or something, and it won't. It can't. It doesn't have that capacity. And you need to start thinking about this stuff reasonably and logically. I think I stated it very clearly between city council the other day. I do logic and reason. Judging is more complex than simple apprehension. Instead of just thinking one concept like man, it relates to two concepts like man and mortal to each other by predicating one term of the other in judging that. Man is mortal, or man is not a triangle. See, those are judgmental statements. People make those all the time. That's fine. You can judge. And like it says here, there are predicates for those judgments. But if those predicates aren't in order, then it doesn't flow. As judging is more complex than simple apprehension, reasoning is more complex than judging. As judging moves from one act of simple apprehension to another, the reasoning moves from two or more judgments to another, the conclusions, in arguing that if the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. Example, instead of just sticking with all men are mortal, it goes into all men are mortal, and I am a man, therefore I am mortal. Or a man is not a triangle, and that is a triangle, therefore that is not a man. The mental products produced in the mind by the three acts of the mind are concepts, judgments, and arguments. Concepts, judgments, and arguments. So you can bring forth concepts and arguments as opposed to judgments. Or you can bring judgments and concepts in as opposed to arguments. Learn how to construct your language and learn how to have conversations with each other that can be based on concepts and judgments without arguing. I think we'll get along a lot better. I think we'll get a lot farther. I think we'll progress a lot, much more abundantly in the prosperity of gaining wisdom. So, the mental products produced are concepts, judgments, and arguments. The concepts are the products of conceiving, the products of judging are from judgments, and the products of reasoning or arguing are from arguments. So the reasoning steps in when you have an opposing view that creates an argument that you discuss. Just because it means argument, or it says argument, doesn't mean it's something negative. Argument literally means coming to a conclusion yet. It means it hasn't been concluded. So therefore you got the first premise of reason, or a first premise of logic, which is a belief, on two sides. The beliefs may correlate somewhat, but in clarifying them and making them definite, there's a distinct difference. That's the argument. It only comes in at the end. A lot of people come into conversations in argument because they already have a belief. They've already clarified theirs, and they're either miscomprehending somebody else's or they're interpreting it correctly, and there is an argument, but they get emotional about it. You don't need to. Yeah, I saw that, Big Back. Those people have, and you can see in their chat, or excuse me, you can see in their chat all the wrenches. Do you really think that's like the government? Do you really think we need this much government? That's the problem. Absolutely, they're scared of the truth. And John's absolutely correct. If we don't argue, we don't learn intellectually. We need the argument. But I urge people to understand that term argument isn't a negative connotation. It's not a fight. It's more of a conversation that brings you to a conclusion. So it continues on. It says, distinguishing between the acts and their objects is not crucial for logic. What is crucial is distinguishing the three acts and the three objects. So you don't want to separate the judgments from being the product of judging. You don't want to have the argument be dislodged from the product of the argument. You don't get any conclusions that way. You have to leave them intact. That's why I say the symbolic logic doesn't make any sense to me, because if you're going to leave elements out and call it symbolic and make inferences, that's another problem with false logics, is that you make inferences that aren't there, as well as, like it said with symbolic logic, denies parts of traditional logic that are there. You can't do either one. Logic and reason put things in an order, and that's the way reality works. And remember, reality is the noun of the adjective real. If it doesn't come to a conclusion of reality, then logic says it's not real. Pure and simple. The three mental entities, concepts, judgments, and arguments, are expressed in logic as terms, positions, and arguments. Terms, positions, and arguments. This is basically what the construct of the English language is all about. It's all about the terms, the propositions. Excuse me, I said that wrong. Positions, terms, propositions, and arguments. So when you have a statement in language, it's filled with a bunch of terms. Each of them is making a proposition. This is why we use the term predicate. The one proposed in the future is predicate on the thing that proposed it. That's what connects things and makes it a logic path. It has to be in order. You have to be able to have the proposition relate to the predicate. Predicate is what makes the proposition for the next part of the statement. You have to keep that in order. And like I said, coin your words or purse your lips. The people that understand, have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, will see your babble. They will hear your babble. They are expressed in language as words, that's the terms, declarative sentences, that's the propositions, and paragraphs, which brings you the conclusions that show the arguments. Or at least two or more declarative sentences connect by a word like therefore, which indicates an argument. Examples: man. Socrates is a man. So we have man as a word. We have Socrates is a man as a declarative sentence. And then we have a paragraph that says all men are mortal, and Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. See, logic, like I said earlier in the thing, it helps you in everything in life. It can help you in everything in life. And particularly if you learn how to apply it to the English language, so it can help you understand what other people are saying and get through their delusions and arguments, and maybe have some kind of foundation of where you can actually speak with them. Terms equal time. How long will they last? Yes. Contract terms and conditions. In contract terms, contract means with, tract means time. With time. It's the tract of land. Oh, that's the Smith's tract of land. It's been in their family since they first moved there 89 years ago. That's a term. It's a span of time. Absolutely correct. Logic does not deal with interrogative sentences. Questions like, what time is it? Imperative sentences, commands or requests like, pass the mustard, please. Exclamatory sentence like, oh wow, what a hit. Or performative sentences like, I dub thee a knight. But only with declarative sentences. So when you're going to run around, like I said, making all these declarations, you better learn how to coin your words or purse your lips. Non-declarative sentences are not propositions. In other words, just like I said, a proposition is dependent upon a predicate, something that proposes it. That's your declaration. It's the same thing. You're proposing or declaring something. I declare I am a child of God. All children of God are redeemed. Therefore, I have been redeemed. Now you go look in those Christian scriptures and find that. And understand, when I sit your ass down as an insurance agent, we had an insurance guy come to the door this morning. And it was pretty funny how I asked him if he was a Christian. And he said, yeah. Because this guy couldn't get over the concept that if it's a benefit, then you don't have to pay for it. That's the definition of a benefit. If you have to pay for it, then it's not a benefit. It's an equal exchange. There's a difference. He didn't want to pick up on that. And he tried to profess that he'd been an insurance sales agent for 16 years, and he knew what he was talking about. He's got the policy. So I asked him if he was a Christian. He says, yeah, I've been a Christian. I was raised Catholic. I said, oh, so and I see you're about 50, 55 years old. He says, yeah. And I said, so you've been a Christian for all of your life. And this is after he told me he was a Christian, but he didn't know the scriptures because those are just written by another man. I don't care if they're written by another man. If you're going to claim that you're a Christian, then you need to know the Christian scriptures to be able to have the predicate for that proposition. See? So, his determination was that man wrote that book, and therefore he's not going to listen to those scriptures, but he's still a Christian. So I pointed out to him, well, you're an insurance salesman for 16 years, And you're depending on those policies that another man wrote to make your motherfucking income. Told him I was done with his bullshit. He could leave. He wanted to sit in that fucking kitchen chair, look at my companion as if though he was going to ask her to do it. Just like the dog. I tell the dog he doesn't need to go out. So what's he do? He goes to mom and starts begging to mom. Mom says he needs to go outside. And she doesn't know how to communicate with the dog. So rather than listen to the guy that knows about the dog and knows how to deal with the dog, she pisses and moans at the guy that loves her and professes that that's how she's going to behave. Don't work like that. So when I told him he could get up and leave, he wanted to sit there and look at my companion. I told him maybe he was mistaken and didn't understand. I'm the man of this fucking house, and I just told him to get the fuck out. Then he got up and got the fuck out. I'm tired of Hitler's willing executioners running around babbling, not being able to use logic, saying bullshit like I've been a Christian all my life, but I don't read the scriptures because it was another man that wrote them. But here's an insurance policy that this guy wrote, and it's completely good. It's a benefit, but it's going to cost you. The fuck out of my house. Tired of full-grown adults that don't know how to use reason and logic. That's why I do what I do. The difference between logic and language is one, that languages are made artifices, and therefore there are many languages that are different in place and time. While one, logic is not made but discovered, and two, there is only one logic. There is no Chinese logic or American logic, no 19th century logic or 20th century logic, or even masculine logic or feminine logic. Just logic. It's a path. That's all it is. What is often called feminine logic is intuition rather than logic. So be very careful again. Like I said, we have instincts and intuition, but those are separate from logic. Logic is the ability to take things in, process them, and come up with a reason for a conclusion of some kind of declarative statement, some profession of knowledge, of knowing. Like mathematics, logic is objective, universal, and unchangeable in its basic laws or principles. But the forms in which these unchangeable laws or laws of logic are expressed are linguistic forms, and these forms are changing and varied. A term has no structural parts. It is a basic unit of meaning, like number 1 in math, or like an atom in an old atomic theory, what they believed atoms were unsplittable and had no parts. A proposition has 2 structural parts, the subject term and the predicate term. Again, otherwise, the proposition to what's coming is the predicate of what is proposed. It's got to have both of them so that you can come to that conclusion. The subject term is what you're talking about. The predicate term is what you say about the subject. Man is mortal. Just like it says, mortal is the subject. Excuse me. Yeah, mortal is the subject, and man is what you say about that subject. Man is mortal. Mortality belongs to many things other than just man, just like logic belongs to everything, including other languages. The languages don't make any difference to the logic. Here, mortality doesn't make any difference as a subject as long as the predicate is that mortal thing, a life form. It's mortal and not a god. The predicate term is what you say about the subject. The words subject and predicate mean the same thing in logic as in grammar. So again, you could take subject as man, and what you say about man is the mortal part. It's what I said earlier in the series, that if you take English in a proper grammar and you read it forwards, if it's proper, you should be able to read it backwards, and it should tell you the same thing. Oh my. Charge for a taser as a firearm. Yeah, they can't do that. It's got to have that fire. It's got to have that gunpowder in it in order for it to be an explosive device. See, they even have air guns that use air cylinders or compressed gas canisters or even compressors with an air hose right to the thing. That's not a explosive as they deem in the determination. And that's why we have to understand the language and everything, folks, because that's what these laws are doing. They're slowly trying to change the mentality of people, and that's to dismiss the logic. It's slowly trying to get people to dismiss logic entirely. Goes on to say, it says, an argument has two structural parts. So a term has no structural parts. It is a basic unit of meaning. It's an intellectual thought concept. And the only actual structural part there is the word that gives rise to that concept. But it doesn't have to be on paper. It can literally be verbal or oral where it's saying there is no structure to it. It's just a sound. An argument has two structural parts: the premise and the conclusion. The premises are the propositions that are assumed. They are the reason or evidence for the conclusion. The conclusion is the proposition that you're trying to prove. For instance, in the classic example, all men are mortal, and I am a man, therefore I am mortal. The argument is everything inside the quotation marks. The two premises are all men are mortal and I am man. The conclusion is therefore I am mortal. The subject is the first premise, is men, and the predicate is mortal. The subject of the second premise is I, is as the predicate, and a man as the subject, the proposition. And the subject of the conclusion is I, and the predicate is mortal. And I think that brings us to the end of it, folks. We've got a few more pages, but they're work terms. So it's actually getting into the very first part of the lesson to give to a student to have them review and take a test. So I don't know what you guys think, but the way I see it is the language that people use today is very disheartening, because I see that they're not using logic and reason to make their predicate propositions and conclusions, and they're just repeating what somebody else has said in the past, literally quoting things, because they can't generate a valid sentence by themselves. They don't have the concept of looking at things in a logic pattern and see it for what it is as false, and they will stick and double down on that falseness, like my companion. She likes to do that. It's time, like I said, to grow up and be adults. Quit playing this thing that words don't mean anything when they most certainly do. They are inherently one of the most important aspects of being able to interact with each other, because it is a delineated form of communication that is not natural to begin with. It is only because man has this intellect that is different than the animal world that we have this language, that we developed it to begin with. I don't know if I'd have grown up learning how to speak the English language if my mom and dad didn't speak. But I do know that as a man, I could grow up and certainly live in this world naturally without having to have that language. Everything I need to know about this world through logic and reason, I can learn through a thought process without having to have a language process. So we need to think about this stuff and really get back to the roots of what your reason for doing anything before you even start speaking about it. That's where the reason and logic comes in, is in the actions. The language only expresses. The reason and logic is why we have actions speak louder than words. Because by reason and logic, I don't give a fuck whether you say you're going to go to the store. It's when you go to the store that I comprehend the truth of the action and not the words. See, it's the actions that solidify anything that comes out through some kind of conceptual thought. It's not the imagination that's. Let me make sure I say this right, because the imagination is the important part about the logic. But the imagination is the one that's going to lie about it. The imagination is the one that's going to be far-fetched. It's a man's actions that are very discernible. And I don't care if an officer stands there and repeatedly tells me, I don't want to shoot you, I don't want to shoot you. Then put down the fucking gun and let's talk. Because that's the problem. Scripture, do not conform to the pattern of this world. Be transferred by the renewing of your mind. Yes, use that reason and logic in your thought process to communicate with your body so that your body can communicate with the rest of the world in peace. And greetings from the UK. Greetings, Jonathan. Appreciate the love and support. And with that, guys, again, we are done. I want to thank everybody. Kara, John, Big Back. We even have El Pathetical, the yellow belly Wyrd Wyzard, came in and spent some time with us. Him and his clowning around. Keep following every round, claiming follow no one around. Excuse me, I join a lot of panels, and I've been doing panels, and I have just as much a right to do panels as anybody else. So if you want to make the claim that I'm following you around, you would have to put down the premise that I am in fact following you and that you didn't follow me there. You know, this is in relation to today's little debacle with Brian again on OTKs, open to knowledge, somebody I've known for a long time on these panels that I met through another panel called Unscrambled Minds, another panel that I visit regularly and go over and give them support. And these are people that I know and have been following them as a subscriber for quite some time. So again, the subscriptions would show who subscribed first and therefore maybe who's following who. So I urge you again to think reasonably and logically about what the fuck you're saying in these platforms, especially when you come to mine. See, you're not going to trigger me with your bullshit. You're about to have a wake-up call. Well, what kind of a better wake-up call is maybe lung cancer? Or how about your son dies of SID? Or how about the state takes away your children? How many, and what kind of wake-up call are you talking about? Is it one where I can wait for that alarm to go off? Or is it something you're going to serve up personally? Because if it's something you're going to serve up personally, I can't wait to see this little cake, this cupcake thing. Because if that's what you're posing, you ain't shit. Been doing this long enough that I know what I put out, and I know you can't do a fucking thing about it. So go ahead with your wake-up call, as you call it, and wake a motherfucker up. I'd like to see you wake me up. So anyway, along with that, I appreciate everybody's support again. And yes, Hitler did try to unite his people. I think he went by it totally wrong, but yeah. And with that, you know me. Guys, I love you. But I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back or not. And that's to say, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may God bless you and have a good night.
Always make sure